All right, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Yes? Awesome. We are going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to Energy Elevated at Western Colorado University. My name is Jessica Laramie, and I am the director of the Energy Management Program here at Western. It is truly an honor to stand before you today as we embark on this insightful journey into the complexities and nuances of the energy landscape. Our gathering here signifies a shared commitment to understanding, embracing, and leading in the face of transformative changes shaping our energy ecosystem. The theme of our event, Energy Elevated, encapsulates the lofty ambitions and profound challenges that lie before us. In today's interconnected world, the evolution of energy systems is not merely a matter of technological advancement. It is a multifaceted puzzle, woven intricately with the economic, social, cultural, and environmental threads. Energy in its various forms is a fundamental and constant presence in our world. It is neither created nor destroyed. It can only change form. It transforms and moves through the interconnected web of land, cultures, and people. This energy has historical footprints rooted in the places from which it is developed and the communities that it impacts. As we discuss our sources of energy, we must also acknowledge the lands that energy traverses, the cultures it touches, and the people that it influences. As we delve into these complexities today, we lead through examples of collaborative leadership. Collaborative leadership is not about one single entity or person dictating the path forward. It is about bringing diverse minds together, acknowledging varying viewpoints and perspectives, and engaging in respectful, healthy civil discourse. It's about including all rights holders and stakeholders in conversation and decision-making processes. It is through these conversations that we can unearth innovative solutions, foster understanding, and pave the way for equitable, sustainable progress. In our discussions today, we will confront challenging questions and explore innovative ideas. We will engage in dialogue that respect the rich tapestry of our beliefs and opinions present in this room. By doing so, we are not only acknowledging the complexities of the evolving energy landscape, but we are embracing the strength that comes from diversity of thought and experience. It is imperative to consider the future implications of our actions, especially considering the next generation. The energy sector is not just about power generation. It is about public health, safety, security, environment, economies, and prosperity. It is about livelihoods and careers, opportunities for the future. The decisions we make today shape our opportunities for that future. Recent data paints a compelling picture for the future of jobs and employment in the energy sector. The growth of renewable energy industries, advancements in technology, and the increasing focus on equity and sustainability are driving significant shifts in the market. These shifts present both challenges and opportunities, and it is our responsibility to prepare the next generation for the evolving demands of the energy sector. As we embark on this journey today, let us do so with open hearts and open minds. Let us listen actively and learn from one another, and approach our discussions today with empathy and understanding. Together, we can elevate not only our understanding of the evolving energy landscape, but also our collective capacity to lead, inspire, and shape an affordable, reliable, accessible, clean future for all. Today is possible because of our amazing faculty and staff here at Western, leading by examples of collaborative leadership. You'll see them acting as moderators and facilitators for today's panel. It is because of their dedication to energy education that this energy forum is possible. If I call your name, can you please stand up, and we'll provide a big thank you to Dr. Elizabeth Petrie, Dr. Brad Burton, Emily Artali, Jillian Bauer, Gary Steffens, Kate Clark, Ashley Sokol, Veronica Wild, Provost Jess Young, and our School of Business Dean, Jane Kolodinsky. Thank you for your help and support in offering today's event. Today's event is also possible because of our Western students. Across disciplines, our students desire factual, realistic, unbiased information about the energy landscape. They want to make informed decisions so that they may positively and actively engage in our energy future. In conjunction with today's event and in demonstration of that very point, we hosted a student challenge. The challenge was to create a one-page infographic that captures the key elements of our energy evolution. That infographic must include solutions-oriented goals for the future, highlighting the complexities of our energy evolution while identifying the key players or concepts involved in achieving these goals. In addition to a cash prize, the winners earn the opportunity for their graphic to be displayed at today's event. You will see this year's winning submission displayed on a poster and projected over the big screen during lunch and in the UC ballroom. Please join me in recognizing this year's competition winners, Caden Light and Charlie Kulik. A few brief housekeeping items. Lunch will be served at 1:00 p.m. in the UC ballroom down the hall. We are offering an optional guided tour of the Rady School's geothermal energy system as a part of today's programming. If you're interested in participating in the tour, please meet out front in the hallway here at 12:50, and our students will escort you over to the Rady building. Some, but not all of our speakers today will utilize Slido for fielding audience questions. Where that is the case, please use the QR code and associated website to submit your questions. Slido questions can be submitted at any time during the presentation, and you can choose to use your name or choose to remain anonymous. If the session is not utilizing Slido, we will ask you to raise your hands during the Q&A sessions and we will call upon audience members to speak in turn. We recognize that we have a jam-packed agenda for today. If you have additional questions that are not addressed during the live session, we encourage you to reach out to the faculty team, moderators, or speakers to seek your answers. Finally, today's event will be projected via Zoom webinar to remote attendees. It will be recorded for future viewing. Audio for the recording is tied directly to our microphones for today's event and may require repetition of questions or comments into a microphone. Once again, I extend my warmest welcome to each of you. Thank you for being here. I am confident that our time together will be enriching, enlightening, and transformative. I will now hand the stage over to Brad Baca, our president at Western Colorado University, for a few remarks.
Good morning, and thank you everyone for being here today. I'm very excited to welcome you. With the risk of speaking with hyperbole, this is a big day for Western. We have an opportunity today to do something rare, and that is to begin a process of identifying and developing a distinctive program and practice, and dare I say center, that we can help identify or help define and support the future of Western. But more on that in a couple minutes. A little bit about myself. I arrived to Western in the Gunnison Valley over 21 years ago. It was somewhat like the John Denver song, coming home to a place I'd never been before. Three things that drew me to this valley and this university and have kept me here over the last couple decades, two of which I had a sense of prior to arriving. Another I have learned early and am reminded of often. First is the place. I'm an avid outdoorsman. I recreate, but I also use the outdoors to rejuvenate and reconnect. I've grown to appreciate how Western explores and expands for our students, faculty, and staff the important concept of sense of place. It is a strength of ours. Second is Western's mission. I was educated in the tradition of the liberal arts and appreciate all that this provided me in terms of opportunity over the course of my life. Our mission talks about elucidating the connections between the liberal arts and our professional degree programs, and this was intriguing to me. I like to say that Western is a place where we prepare students not just for successful careers, but for fulfilling livelihoods, where we equip them to know how to make decisions based on their values. And finally, the people. This I learned during my interview process over 21 years ago. We have the best people on this campus and within this community. For most, the commitment and dedication to this university and to the students we serve is unwavering. In many ways, it ties back to the first two things that brought me here. They work harder and believe deeper because of the strong connection to place and our mission. So why is today important to this university and to me? We have an opportunity to do something that higher education institutions are uniquely positioned to do, and something that is critically important to the long-term vibrancy of our democracy. And that is to be a convener, to bring together a diverse set of people and expertise to frame, discuss, and begin to identify opportunities and to solve some of our most challenging and daunting problems. This sentence in the purpose statement nails it for me. Western's first ever energy elevated forum seeks to bring together students, faculty, government, communities, and the energy industry for an informed dialogue on the realities of our complex and ever-evolving energy landscape. So not only are we fulfilling an important role for our community and region by hosting and facilitating this dialogue, this topic of energy evolution is one that Western is well positioned to lead, given the incredible contributions our diverse set of programs within our natural sciences, our business school, our School of Environment and Sustainability, and our engineering school have made to this field over multiple decades. We are strong in programs like energy management, environment and sustainability, and petroleum geology, just to name a few, because we recognize these are areas vital to our region. They drive our economies, and it's important that we come together to discuss the future and how we, through collaboration and partnership, can play a role in shaping this evolution. So as we begin this day of discussion and discovery, I request two things. First, that we keep to the forefront Western's values of courage, growth, inclusivity, integrity, and stewardship. That we approach each session with, as Jessica mentioned, open minds and open hearts. That we speak with courage and integrity, and we embrace opportunities for growth and inclusivity, all while recognizing our roles as stewards to the land and the communities we serve. Second, I challenge us to think about how we carry the momentum we create today to something perhaps bigger and better. I challenge you to think about what is next in the space of energy evolution and how Western can play a sustained role in leading in this area. How Western can become the place where students come to learn and research and prepare themselves in collaborative and transdisciplinary ways to be our future energy leaders. Now, I know that this undertaking of today's activities and the incredible slate of speakers and panelists did not just magically come together. And I know Jessica mentioned and recognized those who were involved in putting this event together. And I do want to also recognize and express my gratitude to that group. This has been a year in the making, and it's a product of a tremendous amount of work. But I want to thank and acknowledge those people who've had a role in this. But in particular, I want to take a moment just to recognize Jessica. I've often told people in my role as president and my time here at Western, the programs that are most successful at this university are those that have champions in the leadership role. Jessica is one of those champions. When we approached her, Jessica Young and I, about a year ago with this challenge, she accepted it with vigor, and she really kind of drove the agenda, drove this topic, and really produced this event we have today, and has been a central role in furthering the conversation. So Jessica, thank you so much for everything you've done to put this event together, and we look forward to having a great session and a great day of activities. So thank you, everyone, for being here, and let's have a great day of activities. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm the last one to welcome you to this day of energy elevation. I'm Jane Kolodinsky. I'm the fairly new dean of the Western Colorado University School of Business. And I'm so pleased and honored that the School of Business is the host and convener of this transdisciplinary, cross-university, cross-community event. Over a year in the making, today brings together the campus and the community to learn, to converse, and think critically about our energy future. Special thanks to the planning team, which is really transdisciplinary, and to Professor and Director of the School of Business Energy Management Program, Jessica Laramie. So without any further ado, back to you, Jessica.
Thank you, Brad and Jane, for your remarks. It is now my distinct pleasure to introduce today's keynote speaker. Kayla Dolan is the Director of Policy and Strategy for Adamantine Energy. In her role, Kayla guides Adamantine's clients through changing legislative, regulatory, and political environments to mitigate the unique risks to companies. By developing and supporting clients' ESG, decarbonization, and stakeholder navigation strategies, she supports Adamantine's proactive and transformational work in translating companies' sustainability and decarbonization aspirations into action. Prior to joining Adamantine, Kayla worked for an advisor for members of the U.S. Senate and House of Representatives, focusing primarily on energy and environmental issues. She has an impressive track record of success and was known for being results-oriented, building relationships across the aisle, and understanding the unique risks facing the energy industry. Kayla's efforts working alongside state regulators, project developers, and environmental non-governmental organizations helped identify legislative and regulatory roadblocks to the deployment of next-generation energy technologies. Her work has included establishing the first natural gas carbon capture research, development, and demonstration program for the Department of Energy and modernizing the department's technology commercialization activity. Kayla holds a Bachelor of Arts from High Point University. In her spare time, Kayla seeks out adventures in new places and is fascinated by all things meteorology. Please note that we will utilize Slido during the Q&A portion of Kayla's presentation today. You can submit questions at any time throughout her presentation using the QR code on the printed agendas or in various places throughout the theater. Please help me in welcoming Kayla Dolan.
Well, good morning, everybody. Happy Wednesday. The weather is great, thank God. I know there was some concerns about weather coming in, but we have a beautiful day for this first annual event. I want to thank Jessica and the rest of the university team for having me here this morning to spend some time talking about my perspective on the energy landscape. What are the realities of today? Where are we going to go for the future? And how do we come together to have some tough conversations? Like Jessica mentioned, I work for Adamantine Energy. We are a strategic consulting firm that primarily works with oil and gas, but also oil and gas adjacent. So think hydrogen companies, carbon capture companies, geothermal companies, to help them chart a path for a future. So what that looks like is we try to help our companies develop pragmatic strategies that can be sustainable going into 2030, 2040, and 2050. But I'm here today purely as an energy professional with a decade of experience who fell into the industry completely by accident, which I'll talk about, which has shaped my perspective on how do we have tough conversations? How do we find solutions to some of these tough challenges that we're going to have to address in the next couple of decades? And so I was really excited to come up here today because I'm someone who has never directly worked for an energy company, as you heard in my bio. I spent almost a decade in Congress before joining Adamantine, and I don't come from a family with a political background. So I was a clean slate. My degree is actually in special education. Up until about 4 years ago, I can go in through a K through 12 classroom and teach. But I'll spare you the long details, but I was inspired to get involved in education policy when I graduated college. So I went and got an internship on the Hill, thinking I was going to change the world. I was 22 years old. I was bleach blonde. I was wearing a lot higher heels than I did now. I quickly learned you had to wear flats to be able to keep up with members of Congress. But I thought I wanted to do education policy. So I got a job in 2014 for a member of the US Senate from North Carolina. He had just been elected. He was bringing up a ton of his own staff. He was a state rep in North Carolina, and they needed someone to answer phones and to give Capitol tours. And because I had interned, I was the perfect candidate for that. So I'm in my second or third week in the role, and it was my legislative director's first day. So the legislative director is someone who is in charge of all the policies that come in and out of a member of Congress's office. And she said, I need your help. I need you to walk with me to the Senate floor. So I thought she just doesn't know how to get around. So I'm going to walk with her, and then I'm going to come back to my office and do my day-to-day. So we get to the Senate floor. I don't know if you guys have ever watched C-SPAN, but there's like benches in the back where you're all crammed in waiting for your member to give direction. So it also turned out it was the first day that Congress was debating whether or not they were going to pass a bill to allow the Keystone XL pipeline to be constructed. For those of you that don't know what this Keystone pipeline was, it would have been a crude oil pipeline to bring crude oil from the Dakotas in through the Midwest. And so again, I think I'm just sitting here to help. I'm a special education major. I don't know what natural gas is. I don't know what FERC stands for. All I know is I flick on a light and I get my energy. Well, it turns out they thought I was the energy staffer. And my boss had come to me and said, how am I voting on the next amendment? And I was like, I don't know. I don't know what an amendment is. I don't know what a Keystone pipeline is. I don't know the difference between crude oil and natural gas. And then it quickly became realized that I was just a staff assistant. No one knew who I was. But because there was no one to do energy, I became the de facto energy staffer. As you heard from my bio, I built a career out of that. I fell in love with energy policy. I fell in love with environmental policy, all because it meant we had to bring diverse groups of stakeholders together to help solve some of these challenges. And I think about that story a lot, and I tell that story a lot for two different reasons. The first, because I'm unique. I'm a unicorn. If I was talking to you guys 12 years ago, I would say my future is going to be in the classroom. I'm going to live in North Carolina. I'm going to teach. I'm going to have a great life. Instead, I'm up here talking to you guys about the future of the energy transition. And so it's a statement that everyone in this room has a role to play. Whether you're a business major, whether you're an engineer major, whether you're a political science major, everyone in this room has a role to play. And I encourage you to take that with you beyond today and beyond tomorrow. And the second reason is because it's really indicative of the world that we're living in today, right? We have to have a roadmap to get to net zero by 2015, but we don't really know how we're going to get there. And that's okay. And that's what I realized. And that's why I tell this story, is because it's okay that we don't have all the answers, and it's going to take time to get the answers. And so one thing, if you guys get out of this conversation today, is to let, the pressure out of the bubble that no one is really doing the energy transition well. I get to go in and tell companies that all the time and say, hey, no one is doing this well. So let's figure out a path forward. Let's bring in diverse stakeholders. Let's bring in ENGOs and other stakeholders who you normally wouldn't talk to get their ideas. And then I get to iterate on those plans, which, how exciting is that? Is to accept that we're not going to get it right the first time, but knowing that the only thing that we can't do is to do nothing at all. This challenge requires action and deep transformational thinking and change. And so I encourage all of you guys, as you hear the conversations today, have follow-up conversations after, is just to acknowledge we're not all doing this okay, but we're all at the table, and that's the first step. So that's a little bit about me and my perspective and how my career has shaped what I want to talk about today. So a few things I hope to accomplish in the next hour or so that we have together is I want to just give a level set of the realities of where our energy landscapes are today. It's challenging and it's messy. I then want to talk a little bit about climate pressure, We believe climate pressure is directional and it's going to continue to change. But exactly why is that? I am also a big believer that we're going to need natural gas for decades to come. So I'll talk a little bit about why that's our perspective, that even though climate pressure is directional, we're still going to need natural gas. And then I want to end and spend some time talking about how that all comes together for all of us to move forward. We at Adamantine, we like to say when we bring convenings together, we can't wait to see what magic happens. And I know magic is sometimes a frou-frou word, but how we use the word magic is what is going to come out of today that wouldn't have happened if we weren't all here. And so I want to lay the foundation for that. What conversations can happen tomorrow or beyond if we weren't all here? I am a big believer that the sum of our parts is better than us going at this alone. And so I want to give you guys some actions to be able to go at this together and have some challenging, but hopefully transformational conversations in the days, months, and years to come. So first, talking about the realities, where we are today. Like I said, our energy landscape right now is messy and it's challenging. We know we have to get to net zero by 2050. Several companies, the majority of companies, I would say, are either setting targets or they're looking to set targets of how they're going to reach their emission reduction goals. And this is not just in the oil and gas industry. This is the industrial sector. This is the agricultural sector. This is the telecommunications sector. You see Amazon and the Googles of the world also trying to figure out how they're going to reach their emissions. On the flip side of that, as a country, we are still consuming and producing a significant amount of energy. You saw in that chart from that one pager that the students put together that we're still using a lot of natural gas. The majority of what we are consuming as a country and what we are producing are petroleum products, including natural gas. And we are producing today more than we are consuming. This has been a trend for several years, which means that we as a country are able to produce natural gas and export it to countries who need energy. And arguably, our gas in the United States is getting cleaner and cleaner as oil and gas companies are able to innovate and find new ways to catch leaks, to better quantify their emissions. So how great is it as we look to get to net zero and as new technologies come online, we can produce cleaner energy than, say, another country and export it to those to help lift those citizens out of prosperity. And at the same time, as we're consuming and we're producing a lot of natural gas, renewable energy is also coming online at record speed. I listened to a podcast this morning where they said the projections for renewable deployment and generation are going to continue to increase. We see that happening in Colorado. In Colorado, we've quadrupled our renewable energy capacity and generation, which is great. We're going to need all energy sources for the future, but it's messy, right? We can't just flick a switch tomorrow and say, oh, we've hit net zero, or, oh, we're going to use renewable energy, because there's going to be a lot of trade-offs that I'll talk about. And so I encourage all of you guys after today, as you're reading the news, you're informing yourself, you're learning, is just to recognize that this isn't going to be a linear process. We're going to have ebbs and flows of the energy we use, the energy we consume, especially as we try to figure out how we are going to transform our energy infrastructure, how we think about energy, and how we consume energy. So that's the landscape of the country as a whole. But I want to break it down to Colorado, because I'm sure a lot of you guys are from Colorado. Colorado is a unique state. We are primarily blue, which means we have a Democratic governor and a Democrat state legislature. But at the same time, we're also not only producing crude oil, but we're producing natural gas. And I argue when I speak to clients and to other stakeholders on behalf of Colorado that we can produce some of the cleanest natural gas because of the regulations that have put in place over the years from regulators, from politicians, who have all thought that we need to do a better job of cleaning up the environment and cleaning up the industry. So from my perspective, Colorado can be a leader in the energy transition because it can show that we can produce clean energy, we can deploy renewable energy, and we can still meet the demands of our constituents by providing reliable and affordable energy. So that's the landscape of both the United States and Colorado. So let's talk about energy demand for a second. Energy demand is going to continue to rise. We are not going to look at a future where that demand is going to go down. And that's for two reasons, because we have a growing population as well as we have countries, third world countries, who are trying to lift their citizens out of poverty and who want to be able to provide clean, reliable energy. So we're going to be living in this world of tension where we're going to have energy demands going to rise. We're going to have to find a way to be able to meet those demands while also balancing our fuel mix. What is it going to look like in 2050? I don't know. Like I said, the energy transition is messy. No one's doing it well. No one has the answers. I would love to come back here in 2050 with all of you guys and have a debrief. Where are we? Are we using hydrogen? Are we using carbon capture? Are we still using natural gas? Was I wrong? Are we off natural gas in 2050? But it's going to take more conversations and more strategies to be able to get there. And so the next thing I want to talk about is the reality of today of where we are with low carbon deployment. Congress over the past 2 years has passed landmark legislation that has put the United States on a trajectory to aspire to meet our net zero goals. And that is through these 2 pieces of legislation providing incentives, directing the federal government to care about climate, to fund projects. And the best part, in my opinion, about those 2 pieces of legislation is it doesn't leave a fuel source out. It doesn't leave an industry out. Both the oil and gas, the renewable energy community, as well as industrial communities can all participate in this transition. And so just an example of where we're headed, the federal government made landmark investments in solar, wind, geothermal through tax credits, while also directing the Department of Energy. I'm sure many of you guys may have seen these announcements to invest in hydrogen hubs, direct air capture hubs, carbon capture hubs, all in the vein of we all need to do this together. And some of those announcements have shown that oil and gas companies are going to participate in some of the hydrogen hubs, and some of the oil and gas companies are going to participate in the direct air capture. But it's not all oil and gas. We're seeing labs, we're seeing academia, we're seeing a whole host of different stakeholders now coming together to solve this problem. Now, we know with this investment comes energy development and energy projects, right? So, okay, like we have these net zero goals. We know we have to find a path forward. Let's start building projects now that the money is out there, now that companies are invested. It's not that easy. We are seeing significant opposition today to new energy projects. And that is because communities want to have more of a say of how projects get built, what projects get built, which personally I think is a fantastic thing. Up until about 7, 8, 10 years ago, I would say the old school thought was a company gets their permits with the regulators, they get approved and they can build their projects. Now communities want to have a say, as they should. Communities should understand what the project's going to have, where the project is going to be, and what the benefit is to the community. But that is causing increasingly amounts of tension of how to get new energy projects built. And we know that if we're going to reach our goals to get to net zero by 2050, it's going to require a deep transformational change of our energy infrastructure. And the only way to do that is to repurpose what we have or to build new energy projects. And so I paint this picture just because it's messy and it's going to take time. We're not going to know where we're going to be in 3 or 5 years. But conversations like this today are how we're going to get there, both in terms of understanding the energy landscape, but then giving you guys the tools to go out into communities and have meaningful conversations around what may be built in my community. What do I want to be built in my community? What are the trade-offs of if this project gets built? And that leads me to the next thing I want to talk about around trade-offs, about where we are in the reality of today. We are having a lot of conversations around what do trade-offs looks like for the energy industry. We know that right now, natural gas in many places of the country and many places of the world are still the cheapest fuel source. An example of this, Colorado, in 2020's natural gas consumption declined in the electricity sector. But last year, it actually rose 11% because the natural gas prices did decline. So we're going to be living in this world for several years around what are the trade-offs consumers want to pay? What does everyone in this room want to pay for the energy transition? Are you okay with an increase in your electricity bills? Are you okay with an increase in your gas prices? We know that consumers are really sensitive to the prices. And so it's going to be a conversation around, do we want to pay more or do we have to find another path forward? I just bought a house and we acquired solar panels. And I know that solar panels are beneficial and can reduce my costs. However, I still needed to see it on a paper in an Excel sheet, with 2 years worth of bills just to make sure that I could get comfortable with it. And so I just say that is because the price is going to be a huge thing. The second trade-off that we're having conversations around today is we know for a lot of new technologies, whether it's renewable energy or batteries that go into cars with EVs, energy storage to be able to store solar and wind when the lights are off and the wind's not blowing. It's going to take critical minerals that we don't use in our daily life today, nor do we produce in the United States. And so another thing that Congress did was put a significant amount of money into trying to restore some of these activities, trying to restore some of these mining activities and processing activities. But there's a major conversation going on right now around, do we want to mine in the United States? What does the environmental footprint look like? Is the mining ethical in countries that we're getting it from? So this trade-off is also a major part of this conversation, is how are we going to get the materials that we need to reach our goals and to develop some of these low carbon technologies. So that's a little bit about the landscape of the realities of where we are today, what we're thinking about, where we need to go, how we may get there. So I made a few comments, and some of you guys may have caught on to this or not, but we at Adamantine love to live in this environment of two opposing statements can be true. And the reason why we live in this statement is because we think that if you can acknowledge that two different things can be true, then the tension is gone. You acknowledge it and you say, okay, I believe these two things are true. How can we move forward? How can we have conversations around this? And so both of these things are true that I want to talk about today is, first, climate pressure is directional and it's going to continue to move. If you're thinking about, a climate train, it's left the station and we're, on our way to 2050. It's not going back. We believe that the climate pressure is going to continue to grow and it's going to continue to sustain for years, decades to come, while at the same time, we're going to need natural gas for decades. And I can recognize in this room that that's a huge opposing force, right? If we have climate pressure and we're saying we need to get off fossil fuels, we need to transition only to renewables or only to lower carbon energy, well then wouldn't that drive the natural gas industry out of business in the next few years, in the next decades? We don't think so. And so we'll talk about that. Before I get into that though, I want to acknowledge that there are two different mindsets that you guys will all encounter. You guys probably have encountered this already around the energy transition. And I want to acknowledge it because it's difficult. And in my opinion, without acknowledging it, you're not going to be able to have impactful conversations. And so the first mindset, it's what I call the energy-centric mindset. This is the mindset of someone who wants as much energy as possible, does not care what the source comes from, believes we need natural gas for decades. And this mindset comes from a perspective of energy is the lifeblood of our lives. It lifts citizens and countries out of poverty. It recognizes that natural gas is used in a ton of different products that are made today. The chairs you're sitting in, the iPads, the phones that you are holding, plastics, although we now know that there are a lot of potential different substitutes for plastics, but right now natural gas is used as a feedstock for so many things that we use in the day. This mindset is also resistant to price changes, right? We all go to the gas station, I'm sure, and we go to the gas station on a Monday and gas is say $3.99. I just picked that number up because I saw it on the gas station yesterday. And then you go next week and say it's $4.25 and you're like, what the heck? What changed in a week? This mindset is someone who is concerned about the price fluctuations. And this is a mindset that drives a lot of thinking, I will say, in the political world. When I was on the Hill and it was election year, and say there was some type of geopolitical event or something else happened that caused price increases in the gas prices, everyone would hold their breath, right? It was always like the October surprise, gas prices have increased. And politicians across the aisle were always worried, are we going to be voted out of office? Are we going to pay the price for gas prices? So this idea that energy, we need it, we need a ton of it, no matter what the price, but we also want it cheap, is driving a lot of conversations. The second mindset is what I call the climate-centric mindset. And this is the mindset of we have to be off fossil fuels tomorrow. We would be off fossil fuels tomorrow if it wasn't for greedy companies, greedy politicians, and their staff who are continuing to drive the oil and gas development and oil and gas consumption. Now, I want to pause and spend a minute about these two mindsets. I firmly believe that we need both of these mindsets in this conversation because we push each other to be better and we push each other to think about different perspectives that we normally wouldn't. So in order to have conversations about why climate pressure is directional, why we may need natural gas for the future, how do we have further conversations, it really comes down to having a deep respect for each of these mindsets. I, no surprise here, come from an energy-centric mindset. That was my mindset when I worked on the Hill. Anytime a Democrat from my first couple of years on the Hill wanted to come work with me on an energy bill, I'd be like, oh, they're just looking for a token Republican. They're trying to trap me. Getting my boss is saying something that he is not comfortable with. And then I realized how ignorant I was, that I wasn't willing to have a conversation with people who had different perspectives, who have different mindsets than me. And now I can say that my two best friends still work for two Democrat members of Congress who publicly say we hate the oil and gas industry, and their staff, my friends, believe it. But it was once I kind of flipped that switch and I said, oh, wait a second, I need to hear what they're saying because they're probably saying something I need to know, was only when we started to work together. And as Jessica mentioned in my bio, everything I did on the Hill was bipartisan. Everything I did had a Democratic member. And we got through some really sticky issues. We laid the foundation for those two pieces of legislation that I talked about. And when I reflect on that time, it was only because I let my guard down and I said, hey, maybe someone on the other side is saying something that may be important. And we built trust and we built respect for each other. And so I want that to carry into the conversations today and to beyond, is to open your ears to people who may not agree with you on everything or may not see your side, as you never know what's going to lead to that. So those are the two different mindsets that are going to drive this conversation. So now let's talk about why climate pressure is directional. For a lot of you in this room, it may be a no-brainer, but for that energy-centric mindset, some of those people may not see it. So it's always important. I like to touch on this and talk about it. So climate pressure is directional for a few different reasons. The first, me, and a lot of you guys in this room, it's the demographics. Millennials and the Gen Z generation are increasingly becoming more part of our workforce. We're going to take over the workforce. We're going to represent the majority of the workforce, which I know for some of the boomers and the Gen X's in the room, it can be really scary. It's scary for me to think about as a millennial and managing Gen Zers that we're going to be the ones having to make decisions. But we're also going to be the ones that are going to be held accountable in 30 years when we reach net zero to decide where did we go? Did the decisions we make today, were they right? Were they wrong? Where did they lead us to? So because we're taking over the workforce, it also means that we want to work for companies who are committed to sustainability, not only in their commitment, but also their actions. They're showing actions on environmental issues. They're showing actions on social justice issues. And then the second piece of the demographics is the voting base. We are going to be the majority of the folks voting, and we're increasingly voting Democratic. And that means that we want to see our elected officials hold companies accountable, holding companies accountable to change. And as well, another piece of this is we're all going to become regulators. Some of us are going to become politician staffers. So we're going to be the ones deciding if energy projects get built. And that mindset of we want to see change also comes into whether a project gets approved. They're going to be scrutinizing permits. They're going to be scrutinizing community benefit plans, but how a project is going to benefit a community. So this pressure is going to continue to grow, is going to continue to make companies transform and think about the ways they're thinking about climate change. The next is growing public concern. Over the past, I would say 12 years, we're seeing more and more in public opinion polls saying that climate change and global warming is important. It may not be the top issue for all voters, but it's an issue. And then the third is financial pressure. So we are seeing year over year, public companies get more shareholder resolutions asking, how are you addressing climate? How are you addressing your climate-related risks? Or can you actually achieve what you set out for? So all of this is creating a perfect storm for companies to have to think about how they are going to create deep transformational changes. So that is why climate pressure is directional. It's going to continue to go. So let's take a moment and talk about, while in that same vein, I believe that natural gas is going to be needed for decades to come. I've touched on this a little bit, but I want to expand on it. So the first is companies or countries around the world are trying to lift their citizens out of poverty, and they just want energy however they can get it. They want it reliable and they want it cheap. And so because of that, natural gas right now is a great source to be able to export natural gas in the United States or other countries and provide it to those other countries who are trying to lift their citizens out of poverty. We know that increased access to energy reduces infant mortality rate, increases education levels, and opens the door to many opportunities that everyone in this room has today, but that other citizens may not. The second piece of it is, like I mentioned earlier, feedstock. Right now, we use natural gas in so many things. I can't even count the number of things that we use it. When I worked for Senator Cassidy from Louisiana is a big, petrochemical state. And they said, yeah, we use natural gas in, a Dow plant, which goes to makes like our Tide Pods or things like that. I was blown away going up and down the industrial corridor, just understanding how much natural gas is used at feedstocks. Now, I will say we are coming up with different feedstocks to be used in a lot of these products, but a lot of this low carbon technology and sustainable fuel that we're working on is still years away from being commercially and widely available. And it's really expensive right now still. So if we still go back to this idea that natural gas is cheap and it's reliable, it's going to be continued to use for decades. And then again, the price, the sensitivity that I talked about. In many parts of the country, natural gas is still cheap. So we're going to continue to use natural gas until we can get new energy sources online to fill that void. And I will say, and I'm sure you guys have seen headlines over the past couple of years, there are pockets where renewable energy can displace natural gas and the cost is low. But right now, we're not in a deployment around the country or a deployment around the world phase. We're in a testing and developing and thinking about what do we actually need to achieve our goals, our climate goals, while also maintaining energy that is reliable and affordable for all of its citizens. So that's a little bit about the realities of where we are today, where climate pressure is going, why we believe natural gas is going to continue to grow. And before I move on, I don't know, do we have any questions, Jessica? Okay, great. Well, when we get to the Q&A, remember, I'm not a technical person, so save all the technical questions for the panels later today, but I can handle policy and anything else. So, okay, so just to recap, realities of the today, it's really messy. We're all working towards a solution. No one's doing the energy transition well, but we're trying to get there. There are different mindsets on how the future of natural gas and how the future of climate should look like, but we need to respect all of them. We may need natural gas for decades to come. We know that natural gas right now can provide low, cheap, reliable energy for the future. And so now I want to spend some time talking about how we can come together from a diverse perspectives, diverse backgrounds to move forward. So a lot of what I do in my work is bringing diverse stakeholders together, whether it be the oil and gas industry, whether it be the agriculture industry, whether it be the waste industry, to have conversations around shared lessons to accelerate the reduction of methane, the reduction of CO2, the acceleration of projects. And so how do we do that? It's really tough. I worked on a project about a year ago. Like I mentioned, I brought the oil and gas and the agriculture sector together, and I called up a contact that I knew in the agriculture sector. I said, hey, I got this great idea. The oil and gas industry is under a tremendous amount of pressure to reduce its methane emissions. They have come up with a lot of solutions. They're still innovating. They're still trying to figure it out. But we know that the agriculture industry is also going to be under the same amount of pressures. So let's have a conversation around what that looks like. She said to me, Kayla, I've known you for years. I respect you. Absolutely not. And don't call me again. And I said, why? Like, what did I do? Again, I knew this person for years and we worked on a lot of stuff together. And she said, because the oil and gas industry just wants to blame us. They just want to shift the focus onto the agriculture industry. And we're not about that. And I had committed to finding a path forward to having a conversation with these different industries. And so I called her probably every other week just to see how she was doing. Just say, hey, how are the kids? How are the family? Just checking in. Have you thought about maybe wanting to work with us again? I'm not going away. I'm still going to be here. So the sooner you just say yes, the better it'll get. But what I actually realized was that I had to find common ground with her. I had to go back to my Hill days around understanding the different perspectives and the different concerns around having conversations with different people. And so what I had to say is I said, look, no one has the answers. Like I've said several times already on the floor, on the stage today, no one has the answers, but let's have a conversation. I had to build that trust around, we're not going to blame you. We just want to have a conversation. Well, what led to that now is a 18-month successful collaboration with the different industries where they call each other once a month and they say, hey, I just got this request from an investor. How have you handled this? What technology are you thinking about deploying to help detect and capture methane? And it all boil down to this idea of trust. And so I've been thinking a lot about that conversation I had around this idea of bringing the oil and gas and the agriculture industry together, as well as my time on the Hill, especially over the course of the past year where, you know, the Russia-Ukraine war should have been a tipping point for climate change and for the oil and gas industry. But it didn't. We're still relying on oil and gas. We're still having conversations around climate. But what it actually did, I know there was a lot of different commentary 18 months ago around, you know, the Russia-Ukraine war as an example of why we have to get off foreign fuels and why we have to go to renewables and lower carbon energy sources. And on the flip side, you had the other perspective saying, this is exactly why we need to be producing more natural gas in the United States, because we can't rely on foreign fuel sources. So everyone thought, oh, this is going to be the end of fossil fuels, or this is going to be, you know, the beginning of a boom of more natural gas. But we haven't really seen either. But what we've seen is tension being let out to have a conversation of how does climate change, how does our energy industry fit into the world that we're living in around geopolitical concerns, inflation, volatility in different sectors. And so I've been thinking a lot about that, like, okay, I'm in my 30s. In 30 years, I'm still going to be in the workforce. I'm going to be held accountable for the decisions that we make today for my children and my grandchildren. I don't think that, you know, the generations before us are going to have to deal with these types of challenges around getting to reach our climate goals while also maintaining reliable and affordable energy. So how do we move forward? And I've been talking to a lot of my friends and a lot of my mentors about that, because I want to approach conversations that I'm having with you guys here today, as well as in the future, when in a tone of just deep respect of, we need to figure this out together, but we don't know how to actually go about it. And so as I've been thinking about this, I want to leave you guys with reactions. And I want to get your commentary and your thoughts on this in the Q&A. But I think if we all can accomplish 3 things, both today and in the future, both as you guys have conversations about how to move forward with this interdisciplinary conversations around climate and energy, as well in the communities, I think we can have a path forward. And so the first, articulate your aspirations. I believe in a world where there are different mindsets and different strong beliefs of how to move forward. There is always room for shared aspirations. It may be a shared aspiration when it comes to climate change or the energy industry, or it may not. It may be something else. I worked with a colleague of mine who we had incredibly stark difference of opinions when it came to the energy industry. And it just so happened that this colleague of mine was responsible for whether my bills would come out of the committees. And so he told me no a lot. He didn't like what I was doing. He thought I wasn't being thoughtful enough, you know, what have you. Then I found out that him and I were both from New Jersey, and we got to having conversations around bagels and pizza and how we wish that we could get all that shipped to DC. If you guys have ever been to New Jersey, you don't understand the affinity for bagels and pizza. It's all about the water. We say nowhere else in Jersey and New York do you have water that can produce good bagels and pizza. But I digress. So we found a shared aspiration around bagels and pizza, which is crazy. But because of that, I was able to do the second thing I want to talk about is build trust. Him and I were able to build trust, and we can say, hey, I don't agree with what you're doing. You don't agree with what I'm doing, but we both love bagels. So, where else can that lead us to? And we're able to get successful things done. So being able to share aspirations, whether it's in the energy world or elsewhere, it helps to just show that we're all human and we all have shared common ground, even though when on the surface level, it doesn't seem like we do. The second, build trust. I used to like to say when I was working on the Hill that if you knew the person who was torching the world on fire, if the world was burning down for whatever reason, I mean, you guys see on a daily basis, I'm sure on headlines, how dysfunctional Congress is. If the world is burning down, but you know the person who's lighting the match, you may be able to put it out in time. Like my bagel example, we were able to share aspirations and we were able to build trust. And again, this doesn't have to be around the energy industry. Sometimes getting the most done starts with getting to know someone on a human level and then trying to tackle these tough conversations. And so the third thing is engage. So we say when we're talking to oil and gas industries, we say you have to engage the community. You cannot educate your way out of this problem. You may think the facts are on your side, but there are two different mindsets that we just talked about that don't want to hear how you're educating. They want to see you engaging. And so I've thought about that because I was like, there's something here about how we go about in the world about engaging. And so what I've come up with is we need to engage with others who don't agree with us. Confirmation bias in this world is so real and it's so prevalent. We all have the same news sources that we go to. We all have the same podcasts we listen to. We all kind of develop into a routine. But if we engage with different news sources, with different podcasts, with different people, we're not going to agree with what they're saying. It may be, painful to read or to listen. But if you're engaging, you're starting that first step of saying, hey, let me hear what someone else is saying. Let me see if that makes sense and see how can we move forward. And so I've implemented this in my work, my conversations with my friends and my family. I'm very much an outlier. Like I said, even though I don't come from a political background or I've never worked directly for an energy company. I have nieces and nephews who think that I'm crazy and they don't understand, why we can't just get to renewables tomorrow. But I engage with them. I mean, they're 12, they're 13, but kids say the craziest things and you learn something new. But with the status quo of staying in our silos, believing what we believe, fighting for the same old things, just is not an option anymore. Like I said, the only thing that isn't acceptable is not doing anything. The only other acceptable thing is staying in our silos. And so my hope for you guys here today and for the future is to continue to break down those silos, articulate your aspirations to one another, build trust with one another, and engage, because that's how the magic happens. That's how, like I say, the sum is better than our parts. If a special education major who a decade ago didn't know what natural gas was, didn't know when you turned on a light that it was actually electrons that were coming to your house, can try to find a space in this world and try to enact some change, I have no doubt that everyone in this room, whether big or small, can also do that. So thank you for letting me ramble for a bit and sharing my perspectives, my thoughts, and I look forward to a robust conversation. Hopefully you guys go easy on me. No, I'm kidding. I'm from Jersey. I can handle it.
We have a great amount of questions coming in from the audience. So I'm going to go through the iPad here. We've got quite a few that have thumbs up from multiple members of the audience. So I'll kind of go by like quantity here. But the first question we have from the group for you, Kayla, is do you believe environmental consequences should be reflected in natural gas prices as a step in the clean energy transition?
That is a great question. Let me make sure I got it. Should environmental consequences be reflected in natural gas prices? Okay. So that is a great question. And I think it ultimately is going to come down to, do we as a society want to pay for higher prices? So an example of what we're seeing right now in the natural gas industry is there is a new form, I shouldn't say a new form of natural gas, but a commodity, what we refer to as differentiated gas. And this is natural gas that where companies can demonstrate that they have a lower carbon footprint, a lower environmental footprint, and some other different criterias. And companies are paying and consumers are paying a premium for that gas because it is lower, because companies have to spend more money to making sure that they're monitoring the gas that they're producing and they're transporting. They're having to monitor the communities, making sure there's no negative effects. And so while it's not quite directly correlated to environmental consequences, we are seeing that prices of gas is increasing to try to get a lower carbon footprint. And what we're seeing is some consumers are paying for that and some consumers aren't. And so I think we're going to see this trend continue around what is the trade-off to getting natural gas as cheap as possible, to cleaning up, right, some of its maybe previous environmental consequences to reflect in the price. So I hope that kind of gives an example of kind of what that landscape looks like today. And I personally, for one, Kayla Dolan, believe that it's worth it, right? Like if you're able to consume gas that has a lower environmental footprint, both in terms of air emissions and also community emissions, why not?
Awesome. Thank you. The next question we have is, how have you seen political polarization halt climate action?
Oh my gosh, you guys have all day. It's really tough. It is. I'm not going to lie. It's very tough. So I left the Hill spring of 2021. So I went through COVID, and like everyone in this room, we all went virtual. We weren't in the offices together. And so we weren't able to really build the trust and build the connection of how you really kind of break down those polarizations in Congress to be able to get things done. And it became very tough. And one thing that I will say is I don't think the polarization is going away, unfortunately. I think that I'm trying to think of how I can say this diplomatically, but I don't think I'm going to say this diplomatically. I think I'm just going to say it. There are two schools of thought, I think, right now in Congress. You have the old guard of members who have been there for years and years and years, who have been through some of the landmark legislations that were passed in the early 2000s, like the Clean Air Act, which completely transformed. The Clean Air Act was way before the 2000s, but the Clean Air Act was amended that really kind of transforms how air regulations get regulated. And there was a lot of battle wounds through a lot of those debates. A lot of members were voted out of office. And so because of that, there's one camp that is scared, doesn't want to act for several different reasons. And then you have the other camp that's really progressive, who thinks we have to do something. Now, what I will say is I think that old school, you're starting to kind of see them come along a little bit slowly. They're seeing, right, like we're the voting base, we're the workforce, public concern is certainly growing, but it is going to be incredibly challenging from a federal level to get any sort of meaningful regulation in place, whether it is a carbon tax, whether it's something else. We were able to see through the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, and the bipartisan infrastructure bill, incentives and money to go through a lot of these technologies, because that was what the appetite was today, which didn't satisfy a lot of people. A lot of people are saying it didn't go far enough, but that's an example of, we have this, insane polarization in Congress, but they were able to get slivers through. So I know that's not like a crazy optimistic answer, but that's why a lot of states are acting. You're seeing a lot of activity in the states. They're taking the place of the federal government. In Colorado, the Environmental Protection Agency, the Federal Environmental Protection Agency, is looking at Colorado for, say, our methane regulations to try to model after that. Whether you agree or don't agree with the methane regulations in Colorado, that's an example of states trying to act and be proactive because of the polarization in Congress. And that's ultimately why I left. But again, I can tell you guys that story over a drink.
Yeah, along the same vein, do you think political parties will adapt to those changing views of young voters, or do you think young voters will have to conform to the traditional party values?
That is another great question. I think they're going to have to adapt. You're always going to have a certain level of polarization, but political parties are they're going to have to adapt because they're going to have to respond if they want to stay in office. If they want to continue to make change, they have to listen to what their voting base is. And I have just been really fortunate. The 3 members that I worked for all were not anti-climate. In fact, the last boss I worked for, Senator Cassidy, said, your only job is to find a path forward for Republicans to support climate change. And I was like, all right, do you want me to build a rocket to the moon tomorrow too? But over the past, I was with him for almost 3 years, and we did see like incremental change because they are seeing that more and more people are caring about it.
Wonderful, thank you. Have you experienced the exclusion of Black, Indigenous, and people of color in the conversation around energy innovation? And can we do better going forward? How do we do better going forward?
Yes, we 100% have to do better going forward. I don't directly work on this with my role in Adamantine, but my colleagues do. So one of the great things that came out of, number one, President Biden taking office, but also the Inflation Reduction Act and the bipartisan infrastructure bill, those 2 pieces of legislation I keep talking about, was there needs to be a focus on environmental justice communities and low income communities that we know are historically Black and African American and Indigenous. And so there is an effort underway to bring more of those communities into the picture, but we're certainly not doing enough, and we certainly have to do more. The old scheme, I would say, of energy development was, you get your permits, you go in, you explain to the community what you're doing, and then you build. But now companies need to be invited into communities. Projects, like I said, aren't guaranteed. And so it is on to the community or the company when they get invited to do a lay of the land of what is the makeup of the community, what are the economic development challenges, where are the local community leaders, and listen and have a conversation around how can we chart a path where a project can be built that is beneficial to the community. It's like I said, we need to do more. We have to do more. I am hopeful that as more companies, not just oil, gas, but any company that wants to build a project in a community is starting to change its mindset around we have to engage, we have to be invited from all parties to be able to move forward.
Wonderful. And building off that question, there's a few questions that came in regarding both individual and community engagement. So it's a twofold question, but how can both individuals and communities make informed decisions about energy development and ensure they have input in energy transitions?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think first and foremost, as an individual, it's just getting educated on the issues on both sides, right? I had to explain to a cousin of mine who's doing research right now for a college project, and she found a campaign website talking about energy development. I was like, that's not a reliable source. Like they're just, after their own agenda. And so I encourage, first of all, to get more involved individually is just spend time learning. I think we all need to commit to continuous learning throughout, these next decades as we try to figure out a path forward. So my first recommendation is just having a baseline understanding on the issues. And then the second is to go out into your communities and just engage with your communities, engage with your local leaders to understand, how are they thinking about climate change? How are they thinking about potential energy development? Are there opportunities to bring in renewables, to bring in different sources of energy to your community? And having a conversation with those community leaders, whether it's an economic development organization or whatever else is important in that community.
Can you comment on any of your notable ideas or projects that you've seen put into action with your clients that have been successful after coming together in conversation?
Yeah, there's a lot that we're working on that I'm really excited and I'm really hopeful for. I think one of the projects that I get to work on, so I do a lot of coalition work in which I touched on a little bit. I do a lot of coalition work with my job, where we're having to bring diverse perspectives in to find solutions. And one of those things that we have been doing is engaging the business community on how important climate change is and how important it is that we get this right and that the business community has a seat at the table. What we're seeing in certain states is that environmental regulation, climate change provisions are being passed without business communities having a seat at the table. And so when it comes to actually implementing or enacting a policy, businesses can't do that. And so businesses are leaving certain states because of that, which we know isn't good because we lose workforce, we lose the tax base. And so what we've been doing is trying to bring the business community as a whole together just to understand what's going on, say in their relevant state, and say, hey, you need to have a seat at the table because we know you have these climate commitments and we know your state also wants to move forward. So where is there common ground where you can achieve both goals and still maintain a business presence and jobs in that state? So that is ongoing, but that's something I'm really hoping for because we're thinking about bringing politicians who may not agree with what the business's political makeup is, but also having conversations of like, hey, X state regulator, we have carbon capture projects that we may be able to put in the state, but we need these few tweaks to be able to do that. So it's exciting. We're building trust and we're sharing aspirations there.
Great. So can you expand more on, really prioritizing climate as an issue for companies, and how do you move that commentary into actual action and executable projects for the industry sector?
Yeah, so it is a process of slow and incremental change, I would say. I don't want to sugarcoat it. So the first step that we see is, you have, say, a shareholder, you have an investor, if you're a public company, who is asking leadership, hey, how are you going to reach your climate goals? You said you want to reduce methane by 30% or something like that. How are you actually going to do that? So that's when the action comes, right? You have that aspiration and now everyone wants to see action. So normally what that happens is that trickles down to what we call middle managers. The middle managers are the ones that are going to actually have to implement and come up with strategies. And a lot of times we spend in our work the first couple months of engaging with clients is just getting buy-in, just giving a lay of the land of, hey, this is why this is important. We know your day-to-day operation is equally as important, but it's time to respond to some of these pressures. And so we spend a lot of time laying the groundwork of, hey, these are what competitors are doing. This is what, states and the federal government are pushing forward. If you're, say, exporting a product to Europe is way more ahead of us in terms of what they want to do in climate change. You want to stay in business, you're going to have to come up with these strategies. So number one, we talk about buy-in. We spend a lot of time getting everyone on the same page, level setting. A lot of times there's a lack of basic understanding with some folks around what needs to be done. And then it comes down to, okay, we have the buy-in. So now what is feasible? And like I said, we iterate a lot. We may come up with a plan and then they say, wait a second, this is going to cost too much money and we're not going to be able to get the impact that we originally envisioned. So then we just kind of dig in and we say, hey, what is reasonable? What's not reasonable? And then we craft bespoke strategies around what each company needs. But it really starts with a buy-in and getting a company and a company culture bought in to this idea of reducing their emissions and responding to climate pressure.
Well, thank you. So we have a lot of questions coming in on natural gas. So I'm going to switch gears over to natural gas specifically for a minute. But one of the themes I'm seeing come through here is why are we continuing to develop that infrastructure for natural gas in developing economies and developing countries when we have cleaner technology readily available? Can you talk a little bit more about natural gas and why you think it'll be around, and why not move to those cleaner development technologies when we're talking about exporting from the U.S.?
Yeah, I think that if we could export those cleaner technologies tomorrow at a reasonable price, countries would want it. But unfortunately, we're just not there yet. We are seeing in a lot of third world countries renewable energy coming online because that is deployable, right? That is scalable and it is cheaper. However, we do know that the sun doesn't always shine and the wind doesn't always blow. And so until you have the energy storage capacity to be able to store excess renewable energy, you need a backup power. And that backup power can be gas because it's cheap and it's reliable. And at the end of the day, I mean, again, talking kind of off the cuff, it really comes down to cost and the technology. We are still, several years away from robust deployment of hydrogen or carbon capture or other technologies like that. So in the meantime, we know we can get gas out to a lot of these countries who need it to supplement, if they do have renewable projects.
So, you alluded to that slow incremental change or, the time that it will take. If we don't have time, how do we speed things up?
Yeah, I ask myself that question a lot. If we don't have time, how do we speed things up? I think that in order to speed things up, there's a couple of things. First, it's really expensive to test new technology and to deploy new technology and either repurpose infrastructure or build new infrastructure. And so I think between the IRA and the bipartisan infrastructure bill, laid the groundwork to speed things up because now there's incentives and now there's money flowing in for companies to be able to test some of these technologies. So I think the more money and the more time that can be invested can help accelerate some of these transitions. I think the second piece of this, and I didn't touch on this in my remarks, but it's the workforce. We need the smartest minds on this. And we think part of the reason why we need natural gas for decades is because of the workforce. The oil and gas industry has had to transform itself for years and years and years. And so being able to bring that workforce onto this problem can help accelerate it. Many of you who are going to be graduating, who are going to be engineers, you're going to be part of the solution. And so I really think it's a matter of being able to free up resources to be able to accelerate action. And another piece that I don't want to go on a tangent on, but there's also regulatory challenges of speeding this up around permitting reform, around getting, like I mentioned, projects built. And so we're kind of in this perfect storm where we have to decide, are we going to invest more money? Are we going to make changes to our regulatory environment to allow projects to get built? Otherwise, we're going to kind of be in this mess.
Great. Thanks, Kayla. So I know Adamantine has that you put out a podcast, and some of your closing remarks on that podcast, I'm going to kind of flip the script on you and some of your peers at your company. But always ends in, what are you most optimistic about for the future? So can you please share as we close your remarks today, what are you most optimistic about going forward?
I am most optimistic that our silos are finally breaking down and we're having conversations with people who we wouldn't be having conversations with, because like I said, we can't operate in silos. So I'm more optimistic that there's gonna be more conversations like this on, this campus, other campuses, other companies, other industries, because we just learn more when we're together and we can geek out and have conversations and debate and find new paths forward. So I'm more optimistic than now there's more general realization that we have to talk to one another.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Kayla, for your remarks today. A big thanks for joining us, coming all the way from the Front Range. We're going to break for about 15 minutes. We'll reconvene as a group at 10:45 with our first panel of the day, which will be focused on sustainability. But please join me in thanking Kayla for her comments today.